Hey guys, how's it going? I'm back here with another video, and today I decided to bring this video, which I'm very excited for, where I will be going over the basics of MySQL while using MySQL Workbench as the platform for us to make all of our SQL queries, all of our statements, and just overall work with MySQL inside of our computer. So if you're interested in seeing exactly what we're going to be covering in this video, I included the timestamps. You can move through the video just to see whichever topic you're interested in. We're going to start by basically talking about the installation process of MySQL and MySQL Workbench on both Windows and Mac. I'm not going to show step by step on how to do that because that's not the point of the video. However, I'm going to leave here and also in the description the two articles that I've personally used in the past to install MySQL, and it was successful. So for MacBook, which is what I'm using, I used this article over here. It is basically a process of installing MySQL through Homebrew, which is a package manager that is very, very common. It is pretty simple. You just follow it until it reaches the point where over here. You stop it over here if you're using Mac, because we're not going to be using SQL Pro, we're going to be using MySQL Workbench. So you just learn how to install MySQL into your machine, and that should be fine. If you're using Windows, I've actually worked and installed MySQL in a Windows computer previously, and this was the whole guide I followed. I followed the original MySQL guide over here, I would say, using the MySQL installer. People get confused by it, but there's thousands of really good resources online, and I just followed this over here and it worked. And finally, to install MySQL Workbench, which is the software we're going to be using to manage our tables, we can click over here and you can see that the original MySQL website already has a really good installation guide for the software as well. I want to also make sure that to tell you guys that MySQL Workbench looks different for both Mac and Windows for some reason. For Mac, I guess it has a dark mode, and for Windows it's a light mode like this. So if you see mine as a dark mode and yours is light, don't really worry about it at all. It doesn't have any difference, just the appearance of it. So I just wanted to get those things out of the way before we actually start with the tutorial. And if you guys could also leave a like and subscribe if you're not subscribed, I would massively appreciate it because it will help push my videos to more people, and that would definitely increase the growth of the channel. I'm really happy with the growth that we're currently having. However, I love putting out these videos for you guys, so I would very appreciate if you guys could give the support to me. So yeah, that's basically it. Let's start the tutorial. Okay, so after you guys have installed MySQL and you have MySQL Workbench running in your computer, you want to open it, right? So I already opened it over here, and you can see this is my MySQL Workbench. You can see initially there's three things on the left over here. I wouldn't worry at all about them. I would only worry about this first one over here, which is where you set up all your connections. And by connections, I just mean every database must be running on a server. And a server can basically mean a computer, right? Technically, we want to run our MySQL server inside of our own computer. Right now, you can see on mine, it has a bunch of different connections, and this is because I'm hosting these databases. They're projects of mine that I've deployed, and I basically have their connections over here. But most likely, if this is your first time working with MySQL Workbench, you won't see any of this. You might see this local instance connection over here, or you might not as well. If you don't, then what I would do is I would click over here, and this will allow you to add any connection. I usually like to put the connection name as something like localhost, something like that, like localhost, because it is the computer, you're running this in your computer, and I wouldn't change anything here. You put the username as root, put the host name as this, or you can change it to localhost as well. Then keep the port as it is, unless you've changed the port in the MySQL installation process, and then put on a password over here. So usually the password you put when you click on this button, it can be whatever you want, but the standard, especially in the beginning, is that your password would be something like password or root like this. Mine is literally root, so I wouldn't worry that much. This is just the database running in your computer. And if you want to test your connection to see if everything connected correctly, just click over here and it should be working. Right now, I didn't put any password and I already have the connection done, so I won't be doing that. But when you see that your connection has been successfully connected, you can click on OK and it should be fine. In my case, I already have this connection established. It is this one over here. So when you see this little box over here appear, it means you've successfully connected to your server. So you can just double click on this and put your password that you saved, and you can just click OK. I would also recommend clicking on Save Password and Keychain if you're interested in that. I'm not going to be doing this, but when you click OK, you can see that it should open up this beautiful UI over here. So the UI for MySQL Workbench looks a little bit overwhelming when it's your first time using it, because it is kind of old school. You can see the icons are pretty old. It kind of looks like there's a lot of stuff for you to handle. However, I'm going to try to dissect everything in this video so that you guys can understand it very clearly. So the thing is, over here on the left, there's all the schemas that exist in your connection, in your server. And by schemas, basically, I mean databases. You can create various different databases into your project, and we're going to be creating one for this video. But before doing that, I'm going to show you guys a little bit more of MySQL Workbench as a whole. So the thing is, in MySQL Workbench, you can create different users, right? And when you were creating and installing your MySQL in your computer, you might have seen something about creating a user. Well, when you have MySQL Workbench, you can click on the Administration tab over here, and it will open up all of this. I wouldn't touch on anything over here other than users and privileges. And when you click on this, you'll see that there will be all the users existent in this current server. So by users, you can create many of them, and this is like the main entry point, because what you put over here, it is extremely important for when you are creating your connection, either it be when you're connecting it through some sort of programming language, or you're just connecting it through some sort of service. You need to keep into account this kind of stuff. So I've created a few over here. You can see my name, my computer name. I'm currently using the root one, but when you click on this, you can see you can change the information such as the password. You can change many different things like roles, privileges, and this is really interesting. If you're interested in that, you can do it directly from here. The whole point of MySQL Workbench is that you don't need to write direct SQL into your terminal or something like that, because it's very dangerous. So if you're a beginner, I would recommend doing something like this if you want to play around with your account. So now that we get this out of the way, let's start working with actual MySQL. Okay, now that we went over the Administration tab, let's work with the Schemas tab, which is probably the most important one. So over here, you're able to create your own schemas, which are your own databases. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to create an example one. So in order to create your database, you just right click over here, and you can see it says Create Schema. You click on it and it will ask you for a name. So I'm going to put something like Tutorial Schema. But you can put whatever you want, it doesn't matter. It needs to be referenced to your application. This name over here will be used when establishing a connection. It is extremely important that you put a name that makes sense, or a name that you will remember. So I'll click Apply, and you can see that the good thing about MySQL Workbench is it will show you the actual SQL that will be generated based on your action, so that you can review it. So the whole point of a MySQL Workbench is that you don't need to write pure SQL. It will generate the SQL script for you, and this is what they're actually generating when we try to create a schema. It looks nice, so I'll just click Apply, and you'll see that it will say Execute SQL Statements, and a green check mark means that it was successful. So I'm going to click on Close, and you can see clearly that the new database has appeared in our left over here. So when I open this thing over here, you can see there's many things we can have, and this is a common misconception that many people have. They confuse the difference between what is a database and what is a table. The difference is a database is a collection of many different things, including tables. So you can see that we can store many things over here: functions, stored procedures, views, and tables. For purposes of this being a beginner's video, I'm going to focus on tables, but a table basically is almost as if you remember in primary school in math, A table is literally that. When you store, it is two-dimensional. There's columns, there's rows, and you can store information inside of that. This is how data is represented in an SQL manner. So it is important to understand the distinction between what is a database and a table. And what we want is we want to be able to create tables inside of our database. So in this tutorial, we're going to create an example table called users. So to create a table over here, you just right click on the tables thing and you click create table, and you can see that this UI appeared in our screen. You put the name of your table. So we're going to be creating a very simple table called users, which stores information about users in a website, right? This is the example that I'm using. So I just gave it a name of users over here, and you can see that differently from if you were creating an actual table using normal SQL, there's a very easy UI that is presented to us, which allows you to create all the columns very easily. So for example, for users and for most MySQL tables, you want to have as the first column in your table an ID. So I usually like to call it just ID, like this, and it will automatically, like MySQL Workbench automatically triggers the fact that if you give it an ID, it is a type of int, which is integer, and it makes it a primary key and not null, which is interesting. You should just leave it like this, and I'll go over what this means. Basically, the first thing over here means a column, so it's the name of the column. Then we have data type, which means the type of whatever you're accepting for that column. So in this case, an ID is a number. So we call it an integer, but you can add, as you can see, decimals, times, binaries. You can put strings, booleans, many different things, many different data structures. So basically, this is what I mean by that. Then we have all the different options and properties you can include for a certain column. And the first one is called primary key. You should keep the ID as the primary key because it is the primary, like it's the identifier for each row. And I'll go over what this means later, but basically it just means that if you want to, for example, access information for a specific role for a specific user, you usually use this ID, which is unique for each user, to identify which user you're talking about. So we want to make it a primary key because that will basically mean that this is a primary identifier. Then we have NN, which basically means not null, and it means that it won't be accepting, you won't be able to insert rows into your table if you don't put an ID. And we want to keep it like this because we want every row, every user to have an ID. Then this is UQ, which means unique. It basically means that you want to keep every ID as unique, so you won't be accepting duplicate IDs. In this case, we don't need to put it, but if you want, we can put it like this. It will be unique either way, but you can put it like this because we want every user to have a different ID. Then we have bin, which basically means if it is a binary, we're definitely not gonna use that one. UN means basically if it is unsigned. Again, it doesn't really matter for the ID column, so we shouldn't really worry about that. Then we have ZF, which is zero fill. Again, it doesn't really matter for the ID fill, but this one over here, which is auto increment, is very important. One thing that is really cool with MySQL is that if you add a column like auto increment and it is an integer, every new row that you add, it will automatically fill in this column for an auto incremental value compared to the previous row. So let's imagine we create the first user, then we don't need to pass ID equal to 1, for example, for it to already add that to the row. It will automatically do that, and when we add the second user, it will make it 2 because it is auto incrementing. Then we have G, which basically means generated column. Again, we're not going to be using this. But finally, we have default expression, which basically means that if we accept null values, then we can add like a default value. If someone doesn't add a value to this column, this is what it's going to default to. So now that we went over all the different options and properties you can add, let's start creating different columns that we want to have in our table. So the first one that I want to add is the actual name of the user. So I'll make this column named name, and I'm going to make it a text. So there's this property called text, and you can just add it. It basically accepts every type of text, right? So strings and whatever. And the important thing is you can actually add a certain amount of characters that you're accepting. So let's make it so that the maximum amount of characters is 64, something like that. So we'll only accept this amount of characters. So then, let's see, we don't want to make it null, right? we want to make it so that it's not null. We don't want it to be unique because we want users to be able to have the same name. And I think all the other ones should remain unchecked as well. Next, what we want to put is basically, let's accept the age of the user, because we want to know how old the user is, for example. Let's make it an integer like this, and let's see. Let's make it not null. You need to pass some sort of age, and I think that should be it, right? We don't want to auto increment. We don't want to do anything else. Next in the table, let's add a username or an email. Actually, I'll add an email like this. And then for email, we want to make it so it is, let's make it varchar. Varchar basically means variable characters, and it accepts like strings, it accepts numbers as well, but we can put a certain amount of characters that we want. Let's put 64 as well. And for email, we want to make it not null, and we also want to make it unique because we don't want two people with the same email being stored in our database. So for now, let's just keep it like this. These are all the columns we're accepting for each user, and I think this is fine, right? To actually create your table, when you're finished with your table, all you want to do is you want to come down here at the bottom and you want to click apply. So when we click on this, you can see it generated our SQL, and this is the actual SQL for creating a table. But we don't need to do any of that because we're using MySQL Workbench. So I'll click apply, and it executed the statement. We can click close, and you can see that now an arrow appears over here, an arrow appears over here. We can click on it, and now there's the users table in our actual tables, like little selecting state over here. So if we want to see this table, if we want to see the data inside of the table, all we have to do is we have to right click on the users table and click on select rows dash limit 1000. All this does is it will make a select statement to this table up to 1000 rows, right? And you can see our table is pretty good. It shows, it includes the columns ID, name, age, and email. Currently doesn't have any data, but as we add data, it will keep appearing in our screen. And most importantly, you guys already have some sort of idea of how we're actually going to run queries in our table. To see the table, we had to run this special keywords over here that are part of MySQL, and I will go over the basics of all the basic basic statements and queries that you can make to a MySQL table so that you understand the basics of MySQL. For example, let's imagine we want to insert a user into this table. How would we do that? Well, we can do that pretty easily with SQL because there is a statement called an insert statement. And in SQL, the statement is used to add rows to your table. So for example, if I want to add a certain user, we can just come over here and run the following SQL query. We can say we want to insert into, and then we put the name of the table. So insert into basically means we're just saying that we want to insert into a following table, and the table name is pretty much the name of the database. So tutorial schema like this, and then dot the name of the table. So the table is called users, so we'll just say users like this. This is only applicable to MySQL Workbench. Usually you don't even need to put the name of the database, you just put the name of the table, but for MySQL Workbench you need to put the name of both. So we just want to say we want to insert into the following table, and then we basically open and close parentheses, and we put over here the name of the columns that we want to insert values to. So you remember that we not necessarily need to add the values for each column that exists in our table. If we made a column accept no values, then basically we could have just added values for certain columns and not all of them. So we do need to specify which columns we're trying to add our values to. So for example, over here, we want to just add a name, an age, and an email because the ID will be automatically generated. So what we do is we just say we want to insert into the tutorial schema for the following columns, the name column, the let me just add the age column, and the email column. So we're just saying we want to add to the following columns, and for each of those columns we want to add the values, and inside of this parentheses we put the values that we want to insert in order accordingly, like respectively to whatever order we put over here. So for example, let's create an example user. So let's call this user Pedro. So I'm gonna say Pedro. then we put a comma over here, and we need to put it in between quotes, because this is how we're representing the values. Then we need to put an age, so let's put 19. Then let's just put an email. So for the email, let's put random email at gmail.com, right? We're just putting an email over here, and these three values over here should be actually working. We're just saying that we want to insert into the following table and into the following columns the following values. This is how an insert statement works. And now if we want to actually make and execute this query, we need to put a semicolon at the end, and we need to click on this lightning bolt over here. This lightning bolt is basically representing, if you want to execute a query, you just click on this, and when you click on it, it should actually execute the query. So you can see everything disappeared, right? We're not seeing the table anymore. And the reason why we're not seeing the table anymore is because the reason why we were seeing the table was because we were selecting all elements from the table. We were trying to see all the elements. Right now we're just inserting something to the table, so we're not able to see it. I'm gonna comment this out over here just because we want to insert more users later. But if you want to see the table and see if the user we added is actually there, all we have to do is we just have to say select all. So when we put the asterisk over here, it basically means all, and then we say from, and then the name of the table that we want to see all the rows from, right? So let's just say tutorial schema.users like this, and this should actually correctly query all the users from this table. When we execute this, you should see all the users existing in this table, and it actually matches what we wanted, because you can see Pedro has been added over here. Now let's try inserting another user just so you guys can see it. I'll comment this out and I'll uncomment the insert statement. Let's add Michael. Michael is I don't know, 45, and his email is michaelscott@gmail.com. So let's add this user and click the lightning bolt. You'll see the thing disappeared, but you can see that it correctly, like this over here is a history of all the queries you made. It tells you the duration that each query basically took, and it also it gives you a green check mark if it was successful. So we actually successfully inserted Michael Scott into our table, and if I select all the users again, you'll see that now Michael is over there. And oh, by the way, the reason why Michael is number 3 instead of 2 is because the first time I inserted Pedro, I accidentally clicked it twice, so it didn't actually insert anyone else, because there was already someone with the email that I was trying to insert, but it does represent the actual number, so that's why the ID, so that's why Michael is ID 3. So now that we understand how select and insert works, let's start working with a little bit a more different aspect. Let's try deleting something from our table, right? So if you're trying to delete something from your table, we need to specify what we're trying to delete. So basically, let's delete Michael, right? Let's try to delete Michael. So in order to determine which user we want to delete from our table, let's use the ID, which is a unique identifier, so that we know exactly who we're trying to delete, right? So to delete something from your table, all you have to do is use the delete keyword. So delete, and then you say from. So you want to say you want to delete from the following table. So we need to put the table that we want to delete, which in this case is tutorial schema.users. And then we need to specify which user or which row we want to actually delete. So to specify stuff inside of your MySQL, there's the where keyword. And this where keyword is extremely important because you can use it to identify which row specifically you're talking about. So when you say where, you just have to pass the column you want to use as the identifier. So in our case, it's the ID column. And then you just want to pass what ID you want to remove. So in our case, we want to remove the row with the ID 3 because that's Michael Scott. So we can just say delete from tutorial schema.users where ID is equal to 3. And now if we run this, you'll see that it was successful. And if we comment this out and select stuff from the table again so we can see it, Michael Scott shouldn't be there anymore. Oh yeah, it's appearing down here. Sorry about that. Let me just push this up. You can see Michael Scott is not here. There's only Pedro as the user. So you can see that this select statement is extremely important. I'm going to add Michael Scott again, just so you guys can see something. Let me comment out the select. And let's add Michael Scott. And let's see if Michael Scott is there. Let's just see. Yeah, Michael's over here again, but the ID is number 4. So one thing we can do is we can actually specify what we are selecting from our table. Right now we're just using the select statement, which selects everything from our table. But imagine we just want to select the user where, I don't know, the age is 45, right? Or every single user whose age is 45. What we can do is we can come over here and say select all from the tutorial schema.users, and then use the new where keyword that we just learned. So I can say where, let me say where age is equal to 45. And now it will select all the users who has this age. So when we click the lightning bolt, it should only return Michael Scott because he's the only person with the age of 45. So this is an extremely interesting thing that you can do because you can specify what exactly you want. I'm going to remove that and query everything so that we have access to all the users in our table. But now one thing we can do is we can try and update a user. And what we mean by update is, imagine Michael just turned 46, right? We don't want to keep it in our table that Michael has the age 45. So how do we update that? How do we know exactly, how do we change something in our table? So to do that, it's actually pretty simple. I'm going to open this up a bit over here so you guys can see it more clearly. We had to use the update keyword, which is a bit confusing in the beginning, but I really think you guys will get it. If you come down here, so you just want to use the keyword update, and then you need to put the name of the table. So we're going to copy this little thing over here and just put it inside. And then we need to say set, which is a keyword saying that we want to set certain columns to a different value. So what we want to do over here is we want to grab all the columns that we want to update. So in our case, let's just update age, and we want to pass the new value that we want to change it to. So we want to change age to 46. And you now must be wondering, well, are we changing the age for every single person to 46? No, because you can actually specify which user you're trying to update your age. So let's say we only want to update the age to 46, where the ID is equal to 4, which means we're only updating it for Michael Scott. So when we run this query, you'll see that if we select everything again over here, if we select everything again, now Michael Scott has an age of 46 instead of 45. And we can actually update many things at the same time. We can come over here and we can update the age to 47 now. Let's say 47, and let's also update the email to I don't know, new email at gmail.com, something like that. And we'll also just update that for Michael Scott. When I run the query, you'll see that both columns must have been updated. And when we select everything, that's actually true. You can see now he has the age 47, and the email is new email at gmail.com. Now, those are the main simple SQL statements that you can run. And I want to emphasize something to you guys. If you don't memorize the keywords immediately, that's 100% fine. It took me a long time to actually memorize everything, especially because there's no use to memorizing everything, right? If you wanna, now that you kind of understand how to insert, how to select, how to delete, and how to update, all you have to do is just go to Google and search insert in MySQL or update in MySQL. And the first thing you'll see is the actual statement. But the important thing is understanding why it works and how it works. It's not memorizing the actual keywords, because as you go through time, as you work with MySQL, you'll just memorize them automatically. So I wouldn't worry that much trying to memorize everything immediately, because it's just not the most efficient way of learning. Now that we got out of the way the simple CRUD, the very simple statements that you can use, let's work with some other keywords that are a little bit more intermediate. They're a little bit more not well like as used, but they are extremely important. To do that, I'm gonna cut the video really quick, and I'm gonna insert a bunch of users into our table so that we can have a table with a lot of users to actually play around with. I don't want to show myself inserting them because that's super annoying. I don't want you guys to spend like 5 minutes of me just changing and adding fake data to our table, but I'll be back in a second with a table a little bit more full. Okay, so as you can see, I added some more users. I added 11 users actually. No, actually a little bit less, but basically I added more users to our table, and I'm gonna be using this table as the example. So the first, the first little more advanced keywords that I think are really important in SQL in general is working with math. So for example, you can actually use mathematical operations inside of here to select exactly what you want. Let's say we want to select every single user from the users table who's older than 20 years old, right? So technically what I could do is I could just come over here and say where. So I want to select all from the users table where age is greater than 20. And this is a valid operation because this is acceptable in the SQL language. So when I click on this over here, it should only select the users with the age above 20. If I want to do the opposite, I can just come over here and do less than, and I can get the two users who have the age below 20. So this is something that is really cool, but imagine if we wanted to add more than one condition, right? So for example, I'll make this above 20 like this, and you'll see it will return everyone. Now imagine that we want to select all the users who are older than 20 but have the same name. So technically I just added two people with the same name over here. As you can see, you're able to add two people with the same name as long as they have different IDs and as long as they have different emails, because name wasn't a property that was supposed to be unique. But imagine we want to select everyone who's over 20 and has the name Olga. So to do that, all we have to do is we just come over here, we put the first where clause, and then we can add a property. So we can add the keyword and just put the other condition. So the other condition would be and name is equal to or equal to Olga, like this. And when I run this, you'll see that it will select the two people who are older than 20 with the name Olga. Now, the same way it works with and, it also works with or. So technically, if we remove this over here, we only want to select people with the age above 20. You'll see there's a lot of people, right? But let's imagine I want to select everyone who is above 20 or people who have the name Michael. So I can just say or, and I can say name equals to Michael. And you'll see that not only it will, actually Michael is already someone above 20. Let me actually check who are the people. Oh, Pedro currently is below 20. So let's select Pedro instead. And you'll see that despite Pedro not being over 20, Pedro has been selected because we said that we're selecting either everyone with the age above 20 or the person with the name Pedro. And with that in mind, we don't actually need to see all the columns whenever we select stuff. So technically, right now we're seeing the ID, the name, the age, and the email. But imagine I just want to get the email for those people, right? I really just want to get the email. So technically, I don't need to use this asterisk over here, which basically means select all, because I can actually list out all the columns that I want to select from this table inside of here. So in this case, let's just select the email column. And you can see that when I query this, it will now return the same information, but only the email. And I can add the age as well, but to add other columns, you actually don't need to use the parentheses. You didn't need to use the parentheses initially either way, but all you do is you just put a comma and then the name of the other column. So let's select the age like this. And you'll see that if I query this, it should now return the age and the email. And the order does matter. You can see that age right now is to the right of email. But if I do it like this, you'll see that I'll put age before. You'll see that I'll receive it. Not that it matters that much, but it's just something that is a nice feature as well. Finally, in this kind of like area of SQL where you're working with Boolean operations such as and or, you can also kind of negate statements. So technically, if I want to select everyone who, let's just say everyone in the table, like this, everyone in the table, but we don't want to select the person whose name is Pedro. So what we can do is we can say select age and email. I'll actually select the whole thing. I'll just put the asterisk. Select everyone from the table and every single column from the table where the name is not Pedro. So where not name equal Pedro. So after we put not, you can put whatever condition you don't want to select. So now we should select everything. And as you can see, when we run this query, it selects everyone, but it doesn't select the person called Pedro, which is amazing. Let's also select everyone but the two users called Olga. You'll see that when I query this, now she disappears. So these are kind of like the set of keywords that kind of allow you to commit a bit of I don't know, a bit of arithmetic and also a bit of Boolean logic while you're using SQL as a querying language. Now, two really quick keywords that are interesting as well, and probably you'll be using it in some cases. Basically, what you can do is you can actually return. You don't need to return all the data. That's something important. You can actually return and query specific pieces of information, specific pieces of data from your table. So technically, for example, let's just find out, how do we find out what is the oldest age in our table, right? We know that if we're looking like here, we can see it's 47, but if we don't know, we don't have access to the table, which if it's in a real-time application, you probably don't want to be looking at the table with millions of entries. So if you want to find out what is the oldest person, all you have to do is you just come over here, you say select from table, and you can use the functions existing in SQL to help you out. And SQL actually has two different functions. Specifically, MySQL has the min and the max function. So if I want to find the oldest user, I can say max, like this, put parentheses, and then over here, I can just put the column name that I want to grab the max information, right? So in this case, it would be age. And now, if we actually come over here and we query this, you'll see that it actually returns a single column called max age with the maximum age. And if we change this to min, it would show the minimum age, which I guess is 19. Oh, it's 12, yeah. So you can see these two operations are really nice. There are functions, and there are a lot of functions in MySQL, which are very, very interesting to work with. So I definitely recommend checking them out. Talking about functions in MySQL, for those who are interested in data science or are interested in even like doing that, because this is very useful as well for those who are software developers, you can do very simple functional operations such as counting, averaging stuff, maybe getting the sum of information very easily. So I know this example isn't that good, but imagine if we want to let's just say I want to count how many users has the age above 20, right? So this is something important to do. For example, we did select all users with age above 20, but imagine we just want the number, how many users exist with that age, so or with that condition. Then we can come over here, use the function count, like this, put the column that we want to count. So we want to count how many of this specific column exists, and we put the condition at the end. So we'll say where age is greater than 20. And then when we select this, you'll see that it will show there's 8 people with the age above 20, which kind of makes sense according to what we created in this table. But yeah, this is kind of the idea. I'm going to delete this over here so you guys don't get confused. But basically, this is the statement we're working with. Now, for example, if we want to find out the average age, right? I'll actually delete this over here. I just want to find out what is the average age in our table. You can do that very easily by just using the function average, like this. And this function should return the average age. It should return a number containing the mean of all the ages in, because you specified the column age over here. So when we query this, you'll see the average age is 26. I don't know how accurate that is. It is accurate, but like I don't remember the ages I put. But apparently in our table from the users we created, the average age is 26 exactly. Now the final function we can do is pretty useless in our situation, but there's various different situations where you can use that. It is the sum function, and it's useless because why would you want to find out the sum of all the ages in our table? But in the case that you would want to, you can just use this function, query it, and you'll see apparently from all the users it sums up to 286. So these are very interesting functions that you might want to use in your application. I use the count a lot. I use the average a lot as well. I don't use the sum as much, just because sometimes if I'm using it in some sort of website, I like to do it internally, but that's totally fine as well. So yeah, that's basically it. Now, since this is an introduction video, I don't want to go into more and more complicated topics such as joins, such as maybe unions, how to use wildcards, stuff like that. I can definitely make a follow-up video, and I would be very interested in doing that. So if you're interested, just leave a like down below. Actually, just comment if you're interested in that. However, the last final thing that I wanted to go over is how to alter a table, because we know that right now we just have a simple table with this pieces of information, right? We just have this columns, but if I want to add a new column, how do I do that? Well, it's pretty simple with MySQL Workbench, which I love because I used to find it so difficult working with it through the terminal, but with MySQL Workbench it's very simple. All you have to do is you just come to the table over here in the left, right click on it, then you'll see the alter table option over here. You'll click on it, so I can just come over here and add something such as password. Let's say that we want to now accept passwords for each user, and then we want to make it not null, and let's just keep it as variable characters as well, and let's just apply this command, and you can see that just by clicking apply it will execute. Now if we come to our table and we select it again, so we're refreshing our table, you'll see that now the password field exists in our table, which is amazing. We can even alter it directly over here. I can come and say that the password is I don't know, this, and then click apply, and you'll see that it will update automatically. So that's something that is really cool, and it's really interesting. So that's basically it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I was waiting to make a video on MySQL and MySQL Workbench for a while now because I really like it. You guys know that MySQL is the database, relational database management system that I use the most. It's because I just find it so intuitive, and MySQL Workbench is an amazing software to use as well. So if you found this video interesting, I would really hope you guys could leave a like and subscribe. Comment what you guys think. I'm open for criticism. I'm open for suggestions for new videos. So if you're totally able to do that, I would really appreciate it. If you want to see this a follow-up to this video where I talk about more complicated or more complex stuff, I'm very down for that because I'm really excited to do that. So yeah, that's basically it. I really hope you guys enjoyed it, and I see you guys next time.